Title: The Celestial Enigma. Chapter 1. A Fateful Transmission. The bridge of the starship Celestia hummed with activity as the crew went about their duties, monitoring the various systems and charting the course through the vast expanse of space. Captain Astra Novak, a seasoned explorer with a reputation for bold decision-making, sat in her command chair, her piercing blue eyes fixed on the view screen. At 35, Astra was one of the youngest captains in the fleet, but her unwavering courage and keen intellect had earned her the respect of her crew and her superiors alike. Her raven hair was pulled back in a tight bun, accentuating the sharp angles of her face and the determination etched into her features. "Captain," the communications officer's voice cut through the silence, "we're receiving a distress call on a secured channel." Astra straightened in her seat, her brow furrowed. "Put it through, Lieutenant." The static-filled transmission crackled to life, the voice on the other end strained and urgent. "Repeat. This is Outpost Kappa 3, requesting immediate assistance. Our research has uncovered something beyond our wildest imagination, but we've been compromised. They're coming for us." There was a sudden commotion in the background, the sound of shouting and metallic clanging. "You must send help immediately. The artifacts we've discovered, they're not of this world. If they fall into the wrong hands—" The transmission abruptly cut off, leaving an eerie silence on the bridge. Astra exchanged a glance with her first officer, Commander Kal'Thrakk Varro, a seasoned veteran whose stoic demeanour belied his unwavering loyalty. Kal'Thrakk had served alongside Astra for over a decade, and their rapport was one of mutual respect and trust, forged in the fires of countless missions. "Can we trace the origin of that transmission?" Astra asked, her voice steady despite the ominous nature of the message. Kal'Thrakk nodded, his brow furrowed as he studied the readouts on his console. "It's coming from the Taldor system, Captain, specifically the fourth planet, Kryus." Astra's fingers drummed against the armrest as she weighed her options. Kryus was a notoriously hostile world, its surface riddled with jagged mountain ranges and treacherous underground caverns that had claimed the lives of many an unwary explorer. And yet the urgency in the transmission, coupled with the mention of a groundbreaking discovery, piqued her curiosity. "Commander, what do we know about Outpost Kappa 3? Kal'Thrakk consulted his datapad, his expression grim. "It's a small scientific outpost, established 6 months ago by the Xenoarchaeological Institute to study the unique geological formations on Kryus. The team was led by Dr. Amara Jin, a renowned xenobiologist with a particular interest in ancient civilizations." Astra leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. Outpost Kappa 3 was deep in uncharted territory, and any potential rescue operation would be extremely risky. Not only did they have to contend with Kryus's treacherous terrain, but the mention of unknown artifacts and a potential hostile force raised even more red flags. Yet the thought of leaving the outpost's fate unanswered gnawed at her. As a Starfleet captain, it was her duty to render aid to those in need, regardless of the risks involved. "Captain," Kal'Thrakk's voice broke through her thoughts, "your orders?" Astra took a deep breath, her expression resolute. "Set a course for the Taldor system, maximum warp. We're going to investigate this distress call." Kal'Thrakk's eyes widened ever so slightly, a flicker of concern passing across his weathered features. "With all due respect, Captain, Kryus is hostile territory. We have no idea what we're walking into, and if the outpost has indeed made a discovery of such magnitude, it could put us in grave danger." Astra met his gaze unflinchingly. She knew Kal'Thrakk's concerns were valid, but her sense of duty overrode any hesitation. "I know, Commander. But if that outpost has uncovered something as significant as the transmission implies, we can't ignore it. Besides, Starfleet's primary directive is to render aid to those in need, regardless of the risks involved." Kal'Thrakk held her gaze for a moment, his jaw clenched in a subtle display of disapproval. But he was a consummate professional, and he knew better than to question her orders in front of the crew. "Aye, Captain. "Plotting a course for the Taldor system," he said finally, his fingers dancing across the navigation console. As the Celestia's engines roared to life, propelling them towards the unknown, Astra couldn't shake the feeling that they were hurtling headlong into a situation far more dangerous than any of them could have anticipated. But she had made her decision, and she would see it through come what may. In the depths of her being, a sense of foreboding stirred, whispering that this mission would change the course of their lives forever. Chapter 2. Into the Abyss. The Celestia emerged from warp, the swirling vortex of subspace giving way to the stark reality of the Taldor system. Immediately, the bridge crew was greeted by the sight of Kryus, a desolate world of rust-coloured rock and jagged mountain ranges that seemed to stretch endlessly across the planet's surface. "Sensors are picking up the outpost's beacon, Captain," the operations officer reported, her voice tinged with concern. "But there's a significant amount of interference from the planet's magnetic field. It's going to be difficult to get a clear reading on their situation." Astra nodded, her jaw set in a firm line. "Do what you can, Ensign. We need to know what we're up against before we commit to a rescue operation." As the crew worked feverishly to cut through the interference, Astra turned her attention to the view screen, studying the planet's forbidding terrain. Even from orbit, she could make out the vast network of underground caverns that honeycombed the planet's crust, their depths shrouded in impenetrable darkness. "Captain, I'm picking up faint energy readings from one of the larger cavern systems," the science officer, Lieutenant Alia Teren, announced, her voice laced with a hint of trepidation. "The signatures are unlike anything in our databases." Astra's brow furrowed. "Can you pinpoint the location of those readings?" Alia tapped a few commands into her console, and a series of coordinates appeared on the main view screen, superimposed over a three-dimensional map of the cavern system. "Here, Captain. Approximately 15 kilometers northwest of the outpost's last known coordinates." A heavy silence fell over the bridge as the implications of Alia's findings sank in. If the outpost had indeed stumbled upon an unknown energy source, it could explain the urgency of their distress call and the potential danger they now faced. "Commander Varro," Astra said, turning to face her first officer. "Assemble an away team. We're going to investigate those energy readings, but I want us to proceed with extreme caution." Kalen's expression remained impassive, but Astra could sense his apprehension. "Understood, Captain. But I must advise against a full-scale rescue operation until we have a better understanding of the situation. Sending a small team could be walking into a trap." Astra understood his reservations, but her mind was made up. "We can't leave the outpost to fend for themselves, Kalen. Not if they've made a discovery of this magnitude. Besides, it's our duty to render aid, regardless of the risks involved." Kalen held her gaze for a moment before giving a curt nod. "Very well, Captain. I'll assemble a team and prepare for deployment." As Kalen turned to carry out her orders, Astra found herself drawn back to the view screen, her eyes tracing the intricate network of caverns that seemed to beckon them into the planet's depths. A sense of foreboding washed over her, but she pushed it aside, steeling her resolve. Whatever secrets awaited them on Kryus, she knew one thing for certain: their lives would never be the same again. Chapter 3. The Depths of Kryus. The away team materialized in a dazzling haze of blue light, their forms solidifying amidst the oppressive darkness of the cavern. Astra took a moment to steady herself, the unsettling sensation of transport never quite fading, no matter how many times she experienced it. She cast a cautious glance around their surroundings, the beam of her wrist-mounted illuminator cutting through the inky blackness to reveal the jagged, uneven terrain. The air was thick and stale, carrying a faint metallic tang that set her teeth on edge. "Spread out and proceed with caution," she ordered, her voice kept deliberately low. "Alia, take point and follow those energy readings. Kalen, you're on rear guard." The team fanned out, their footsteps echoing off the cavern walls as they advanced deeper into the underground maze. Astra couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, her every instinct screaming at her to turn back. But the thought of abandoning the outpost and the tantalizing promise of an unprecedented discovery spurred her onward. Aliyah consulted her tricorder, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The energy readings are growing stronger," she murmured. "We're heading in the right direction." They pressed on, the darkness seeming to close in around them like a suffocating blanket. Astra's grip tightened on her phaser, her senses heightened to the point of near-painful intensity. Suddenly Aliyah froze, her hand raised in a silent signal for the team to halt. "Captain," she whispered, her voice laced with a barely perceptible tremor. "I'm detecting faint life signs up ahead. Humanoid. But the readings are erratic, almost distorted." A chill ran down Astra's spine, but she quickly regained her composure. "Understood. Maintain formation and proceed with extreme caution." The team inched forward, their weapons drawn and their eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The air grew thick with tension, each heartbeat thundering in Astra's ears. Suddenly a faint glow appeared in the distance, growing brighter with every step they took. Aliyah's eyes widened in a mixture of awe and trepidation as they rounded a sharp bend in the cavern, revealing the source of the eerie luminescence. Before them stood a vast cavernous chamber, its walls adorned with intricate carvings that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. At the center of the chamber, a massive crystalline structure towered overhead, its facets refracting the pale light in a kaleidoscope of colors that danced across the rocky surfaces. "By the gods," Kalen breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. Astra could only stare in stunned silence, her mind grappling with the implications of what she was witnessing. This was no mere geological formation. This was evidence of an advanced, alien civilization, one whose technology and understanding of the universe far surpassed their own. And yet, even as she marveled at the sight before her, a niggling sense of dread crept up her spine. For amidst the breathtaking grandeur of the chamber, something felt undeniably wrong. As if sensing her unease, Aliyah spoke up, her voice tinged with a note of urgency. "Captain, I'm detecting a massive energy buildup emanating from the central structure. It's unlike anything I've ever seen." Astra's blood ran cold, her hand instinctively tightening around her phaser. "Can you pinpoint the nature of this energy?" Aliyah shook her head, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Negative, Captain. The readings are completely off the charts. It's almost as if the structure is alive." A deafening silence descended upon the chamber, broken only by the faint hum of the crystalline structure. Astra's mind raced, her instincts screaming at her to retreat, to put as much distance between them and this alien wonder as possible. But before she could issue the order, a sound unlike anything she had ever heard shattered the stillness, a low, keening wail that seemed to reverberate through her very bones. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and Astra watched in horror as hairline fractures snaked their way across the chamber walls. "Get back to the transport site!" she shouted, her voice nearly drowned out by the cacophony of cracking stone. "We're getting out of here now." But even as the words left her lips, a blinding flash of light erupted from the central structure, bathing the chamber in a searing radiance that forced Astra to shield her eyes. And then, as quickly as it had come, the light vanished, plunging them back into darkness. Astra blinked rapidly, willing her vision to adjust, her heart pounding in her ears. As her surroundings slowly came back into focus, she felt the blood drain from her face. The chamber was no longer empty. Towering over them, its massive form seeming to blot out the very air around it, stood a colossal figure, its silhouette vaguely humanoid, but distorted beyond recognition. Astra's mind reeled, struggling to comprehend what she was seeing. And then, with a bone-chilling inevitability, the creature turned its gaze upon them, and Astra found herself staring into a pair of eyes that seemed to burn with the fury of 1,000 suns. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that they had awakened something ancient and terrifying, something that should have remained undisturbed for all eternity. And as the creature raised a massive clawed appendage, its intentions becoming horrifyingly clear, Astra could only watch helplessly, her mind screaming a single desperate plea. What have we done? Chapter 4. Awakenings. Time seemed to slow to a crawl as the towering creature raised its clawed appendage, poised to strike. Astra's mind raced, her training and instincts warring with the overwhelming sense of dread that gripped her very soul. "Open fire!" she shouted, her voice barely audible over the thunderous pounding of her own heartbeat. A barrage of phaser blasts erupted from the away team, lancing towards the creature in a desperate attempt to halt its advance. But to Astra's horror, the energy beam seemed to dissipate harmlessly against the creature's hulking form, as if deflected by an invisible force field. The creature let out a deafening roar that shook the very foundations of the cavern, its massive appendage swinging down in a vicious arc. Astra barely had time to shout a warning before the blow connected, sending Kalin and 2 other team members flying across the chamber like ragdolls. "Fall back," Astra ordered, her voice strained with the effort of maintaining her composure. "We need to regroup and find a way to—" Her words were cut short as a brilliant flash of light erupted from the creature's body, momentarily blinding her. When her vision cleared, she was greeted by a sight that chilled her blood. The chamber was now teeming with dozens of the same colossal beings, their twisted forms emerging from the shadows, as if materializing from thin air. "Impossible," Aliyah breathed, her voice trembling with barely contained terror. They're phasing into our dimension." Astra's mind reeled, struggling to comprehend the implications of Aliyah's words. These creatures were not mere beings of flesh and blood. They were something far more ancient, more powerful than anything they had ever encountered. And they were vastly outnumbered. "Fall back to the transport site," Astra shouted, her voice strained with the effort of maintaining her composure. "We need to regroup and—" A deafening roar drowned out her words as one of the creatures lashed out, its massive appendage sweeping through the air with terrifying speed. Astra watched in horror as the blow connected with 2 of her team members, their bodies crumpling like discarded toys. "No!" she screamed, her voice raw with anguish. Chaos erupted around her as the away team scattered, their phaser blasts doing little more than irritating the creatures. Astra felt a surge of desperation welling up within her, her mind racing to find a solution, a way to turn the tide of this one-sided battle. But even as she struggled to formulate a plan, another creature loomed over her, its twisted form casting a menacing shadow. Astra raised her phaser, but before she could fire, a searing bolt of energy lanced out from the creature's appendage, striking her squarely in the chest. White-hot agony ripped through her body, and she felt her legs buckle beneath her as she crumpled to the ground. Spots danced before her eyes, and she fought to remain conscious, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Through the haze of pain she caught a glimpse of Kalin, his face contorted in a mask of rage and desperation as he unleashed a barrage of phaser fire at the creature that had struck her down. But his efforts were in vain, the energy blast deflecting harmlessly off the creature's hide. Astra tried to call out to him, to order him to retreat, but her voice failed her. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision, and she felt herself slipping towards oblivion. As her consciousness faded, a single haunting thought echoed through her mind. We never stood a chance. Chapter 5. Echoes of the Ancients, Pain. It was the first sensation to pierce the veil of oblivion, a searing agony that lanced through Astra's body like white-hot knives. She gasped, her eyes snapping open as awareness flooded back in a dizzying rush. Disoriented, she struggled to make sense of her surroundings. Gone were the towering creatures and the cavernous chamber. Instead, she found herself lying on a cold, metallic surface, the dim glow of emergency lighting casting eerie shadows across the walls. Astra tried to move, to push herself upright, but her limbs felt like lead weights, her muscles screaming in protest. It was then that she noticed the faint shimmer of a force field surrounding her, its energy barrier trapping her in a confined space, no larger than a standard holding cell. "Captain?" The familiar voice cut through the fog of pain, and Astra turned her head to see Kal'Thrakk huddled in a similar containment field nearby. His face was a mask of bruises and lacerations, but his eyes burned with a fierce determination that Astra found oddly comforting. "Kal'Thrakk," she croaked, her throat raw and parched. What happened?" Kal'Thrakk shook his head grimly. "Those creatures. They overpowered us. Took us captive." His jaw clenched, and Astra could see the barely contained anger simmering beneath the surface. "The rest of the team, they didn't make it." A wave of grief washed over Astra, threatening to overwhelm her. Good men and women, cut down in the prime of their lives by forces beyond their comprehension. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing herself to remain strong, to hold on to the hope that they might still find a way out of this nightmare. "Do you have any idea where we are?" she asked, her voice a little steadier now. "Or what those things want with us?" Kal'Thrakk's eyes grew distant, haunted. "I'm not sure, but I overheard some of their communication while I was drifting in and out of consciousness. They called themselves the Kal'Thrakk, an ancient race that existed before the formation of most galaxies in this universe." Astra felt a chill run down her spine. Impossible. How could any civilization be that old? "I don't know," Kal'Thrakk admitted, "but from what I could gather, they've been in some kind of stasis or hibernation for untold eons, waiting to be awakened by something." "The energy readings we detected," Astra concluded, the pieces slowly falling into place. "Our presence, our intrusion into their chamber, it must have triggered their reanimation." Kal'Thrakk nodded grimly. "And now they see us as a threat, a contaminant to be purged from their domain." A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the faint hum of the force fields. Astra's mind raced, grappling with the enormity of their situation. They had stumbled upon something far beyond their comprehension, something that threatened to unravel the very fabric of their existence. And yet, even in the face of such overwhelming odds, a spark of defiance flickered within her. They were Starfleet officers, sworn to uphold the ideals of exploration and discovery, even in the face of the unknown. "We can't give up," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "There has to be a way out of this, a way to reason with these beings." Kal'Thrak's expression was one of grim resignation. "With all due respect, Captain, I don't think reason is going to work with creatures as ancient and powerful as the Kal'Thrakk. They see us as little more than insects to be crushed underfoot." Astra opened her mouth to protest, but before she could utter a word, a deafening rumble shook the chamber, causing the walls to tremble violently. Instinctively, she braced herself, her heart pounding in her ears. And then, looming out of the shadows, came a figure that chilled her to the core, a towering Kal'Thrakk warrior, its twisted form seeming to distort the very air around it. Astra felt her breath catch in her throat as the creature fixed its burning gaze upon her, its eyes boring into her with a cold, alien intelligence. A voice reverberated through her mind, ancient and powerful, carrying the weight of eons long forgotten. "You are trespassers in our domain," the voice intoned, its words laced with a barely restrained fury. "Your kind brought ruin to our slumber, and for that you must be judged." Astra struggled to maintain her composure, her mind reeling from the psychic onslaught. "We meant no harm," she pleaded, her voice sounding small and insignificant in the face of such cosmic power. "We were only seeking to render aid to understand—" "Your intentions are irrelevant," the voice thundered, cutting her off with contemptuous ease. "You have awakened forces beyond your comprehension, forces that threaten to unravel the very fabric of existence." A wave of dread washed over Astra, but she refused to back down, her sense of duty propelling her forward. "Then help us understand," she implored. "We are explorers, seekers of knowledge. If our actions have put the universe in peril, we will do everything in our power to make amends." For a long, tense moment, the creature regarded her in silence, its burning gaze seemingly peering into the depths of her soul. Astra held its stare, unwavering, her courage bolstered by the knowledge that she was fighting for more than just her own survival. She was fighting for the very principles that defined her as a Starfleet officer. Finally, the creature spoke again, its voice a low, rumbling growl that seemed to reverberate through the very walls. "Your fate has been decided. You will bear witness to the cleansing fire that will scour your kind from existence, and then we shall reclaim what is rightfully ours, dominion over this universe, and all that lies beyond." With those ominous words, the creature turned and lumbered back into the shadows, leaving Astra and Kalin to confront the terrifying implications of its warning. As the echoes of its footsteps faded into silence, Astra felt a cold certainty settle over her. The fate of the entire universe now rested squarely on their shoulders. Chapter 6. The Final Reckoning. The minutes ticked by in an agonizing crawl, the weight of the Kal'Thrakk's words hanging over Astra and Kalin like a suffocating shroud. Astra's mind raced, desperate to find a solution, a way to avert the catastrophic fate that had been promised. "There has to be a way out of this," she muttered, her voice strained with the effort of maintaining her composure. "Some weakness, some flaw in their defenses that we can exploit." Kalin regarded her with a weary expression, his shoulders slumped in resignation. "Captain, we're dealing with beings that have existed since the dawn of time itself. How can we hope to stand against such cosmic power?" Astra opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, a low rumble shook the chamber, causing the walls to tremble violently. A sense of dread washed over her as the rumbling grew in intensity, the air itself seeming to vibrate with an unseen energy. "What's happening?" Kalin shouted, his voice barely audible over the deafening din. Astra's eyes widened in dawning horror as she realized the true nature of the disturbance. "They're opening a subspace rift," she breathed, her heart pounding in her chest. "They're bringing reinforcements through from wherever they came from." As if on cue, a brilliant flash of light erupted in the center of the chamber, blinding them with its searing intensity. Astra shielded her eyes, struggling to make sense of the chaos unfolding before her. When the light finally faded, she found herself staring into the heart of a swirling vortex, its edges distorting and warping the very fabric of reality itself. And from within its depths, Astra could make out the twisted, nightmarish forms of countless Kal'Thrakk warriors, their numbers far exceeding anything she could have imagined. "By the gods!" Kalin breathed, his voice tinged with a mix of awe and terror. Astra felt her stomach churn as the full weight of their situation sank in. They were facing not just a single outpost of these ancient beings, but an entire army, a force so vast and powerful that it threatened to overwhelm the entire galaxy, and perhaps even the universe itself. As the first wave of Kal'Thrakk warriors emerged from the rift, their massive forms towering over Astra and Kalin's containment fields, a sense of hopelessness threatened to consume her. They were outmatched, outgunned, and hopelessly outnumbered. And yet, even as despair clawed at her resolve, Astra felt a familiar fire ignite within her, the same indomitable spirit that had propelled her through countless battles and tribulations. She was a Starfleet captain, sworn to protect the ideals of exploration and discovery no matter the cost. With a surge of determination, she turned to Kalin, her eyes blazing with a fierce intensity. "We can't give up," she said, her voice firm and unwavering. "As long as we draw breath, we have to keep fighting." Kalin regarded her for a long moment, his expression a mix of admiration and concern. Finally, he gave a solemn nod, his jaw set in a resolute line. "Aye, Captain," he said, his voice tinged with a newfound strength. "To the end." As the Kal'Thrakk warriors closed in around them, their twisted forms casting ominous shadows across the chamber, Astra steeled herself for the inevitable confrontation. She knew the odds were stacked against them, but she refused to surrender, refused to let these ancient beings snuff out the light of hope and exploration that burned within her. With a deep breath, she reached for her comm badge, her fingers trembling ever so slightly as she activated the emergency channel. Starship Celestia, this is Captain Novak. If you can hear this transmission, abandon all rescue efforts and fall back to a safe distance. I repeat, do not attempt a retrieval. She paused, her gaze locking with Kalen's, as she prepared to deliver her final orders. Engage the Kal'Thrakk forces, with all available firepower. No matter the cost, you must prevent them from breaching the subspace rift and spreading their influence across the galaxy. Her voice wavered, but her resolve remained steadfast. This is our final stand, Celestia. For the sake of all we hold dear, we cannot fail. Novak out. As the transmission cut off, Astra felt a sense of purpose wash over her, her fear and doubt fading into the background. She had made her choice, and she would face the consequences with her head held high, secure in the knowledge that she had fought for something greater than herself. The Kal'Thrakk warriors closed in, their towering forms blotting out the dim illumination of the chamber. Astra could feel the weight of their malevolent presence bearing down upon her, their burning gazes filled with an ancient, implacable fury. But she did not flinch, did not cower in the face of such overwhelming power. Instead, she met their gaze head-on, her defiance burning bright in the face of oblivion. For in that moment she was not just a Starfleet captain, she was a beacon of hope, a guardian of all that was good and just in the universe. And no matter the outcome, her legacy would endure, a shining testament to the indomitable spirit of exploration that had driven her kind to the stars. As the first blow fell, Astra embraced the darkness, her mind alight with visions of a future worth fighting for, a future where the light of discovery would continue to burn, even in the face of the cosmos's most ancient and terrifying secrets. And in that final defiant act, she knew that she had truly become infinite.